Welcome back, everyone, to special edition. What I call the web devs at night, I think is what I called it. Um, yeah, late night web devs, an evening with the web devs. We're still workshopping the name, but how you been, Dev?
I've been pretty good. It's nice to be back on here on your channels and I guess now my channel as well. Yeah, a good name, workshopping in progress, devs at night. I don't know, something like that.
Devs at night. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, because I haven't talked. I did a stream with Nikki T where I mentioned this a bit, but I haven't mentioned this on my stream yet. I have a new role that I started probably right around the time we did our last stream. Let me see, what was the date that we did that?
Probably December. Or
It
was
would
it
have been.
November?
So I want to get the exact date. It was September 19th. Yeah.
September. Wow,
Yeah. Right. So
longer ago than I thought.
yeah, so I started in November, and I'm working for a company called Sarah, and I'm basically being contracted out to a large payroll company that everyone knows, but I technically can't say the name of, to teach their enterprisey devs how to use AI with their enterprise code. So
Nice.
yeah, it's fun. I think once I kind of finish the contract out, I'll have a lot to say about it. Right now, all I can really say is that I'm just leading like these 2 week long workshops where we walk them through how to use Copilot and Amazon Q and stuff to do just like honestly really basic stuff, just like write tests and update your docs and analyze technical debt and stuff like that. So yeah, that's been really fun. But I did that for a couple months, and then they asked me to do the Indian time zone because they're a worldwide company. They have like 4 or 5 India offices. So yeah, now I work from like 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. every day, which is pretty wild. But I've always been kind of a night owl, so it works out. So yeah, like I just woke up a couple hours ago, and I figured if I want to still stream, this would be the time to do it. Kind of still catch people from the Americas as they're kind of finishing up their day, and then yeah, so that's where I'm at with my work stuff. I'm also starting to write blog posts for a kind of buddy of mine works for a database company that's starting like an AI publication, kind of like how JavaScript Jam was like owned by Edgio, but wasn't really like branded by Edgio. It was kind of treated as like an independent property. They're doing a similar thing. So I'm about to start publishing some new AI blog posts, which will be really fun. I'm working on one right now about OpenClaw versus Hermes, which is really, really interesting, actually.
Nice. Yeah, I saw something about Hermes. I didn't read too deep into it, but just on the surface, it looked very interesting.
Yeah. So you have a new job now, right? How long have you been at
Yeah.
PowerSync now?
So I technically started with PowerSync in December. So that's when I
Okay.
switched from my old job. But I actually like started working in late January. So I took about a month of a break just to go spend some time with family back in India. And so yeah, I think it's like March 23. So it's been 2 months almost exactly now that I've spent in PowerSync, and yeah, it's pretty fun. So a little bit of a background there. I went to the local first conf in Berlin last May to talk about how signals or fine-grained rendering and sync engines are a really nice pair for each other. Um, and it's like the whole talk is on YouTube. It's pretty fun, but it's like not a super new concept. It's something that Ryan Carniato has kind of been talking about his on his stream almost forever. That's what most of my conference talks are. I take like stuff that Ryan talks about and turn them into conference talks. I not a lot of like original content of my own or original
Is
ideas.
this talk is the video on this.media? Is that the one you're talking about?
No. If you just search local first conf and my name, It should be
Sync Engine's best friend.
yes, Sync Engine's best friend,
it.
fine grained rendering. I was trying a bit of a play on dogs. A dog is a human's best friend or man's best friend, something like that. Uh, um, yeah, but so basically, the local first space, the Sync Engine space, has been getting really, really interesting in the last couple of years. There's a lot of players, and PowerSync is obviously one of one of the many players. And they saw my talk. They have been kind of looking to start kind of a dedicated like DevRel and developer community education effort for a while now. And yeah, we started talking a bunch last year around July, and then in November there was the SyncConf in San Francisco, which I wasn't planning on going, but they were one of the sponsors, so they invited me out there. I spent some time with their team. Obviously, had a bunch of fun at SyncConf itself in San Francisco. It's always nice to be in SF, and try to walk down the like extremely uphill and downhill streets there. That's a fun experience. Yeah, so I met the team there. It was I think we all clicked pretty fast, and then right after that, they were like, "Okay, we want to bring you on board," and they were also very excited about all the work going on in Solid. They wanted me to like build a Solid adapter pretty early on, but I just like never really got around to it, which I almost feel ashamed of. That hey, I've been on PowerSync for 2 months now, and there's still no official Solid adapter. Uh, yeah, but that's kind of a little bit of the background there. I was very skeptical going in, but I think there's a lot of basically throughout the conversation there's like a lot of green flags that I saw within PowerSync, the product, the company, and everything, that I was happy to jump in and get back into DevRel professionally. So it's
What were you skeptical about?
The usual stuff, DevRel's getting kicked out as soon as something happens within the company. I'm sure no one in the DevRel position has experienced that before. I'm /us.
And certainly not in the last 2 weeks, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just think most people have either a misunderstanding of DevRel, or they don't know what they want out of DevRel, or it's just like they're just trying to like.
We want DAX is what we want out of DevRel, right? We just want DAX.
Yeah, so some people say we want DAX, some people say we want Lerob. There's like a whole variety everywhere.
They are the perfect inversions of each other.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, Dax spends all of his time taking shots, and Lee spends all of his time cleaning up after someone has taken shots.
So you did DevRel clerk, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is not your first. So it's not your first DevRel role. And is this the first DevRel role at PowerSync?
Yes. So PowerSync currently has like a couple product people, an engineering team, product success team, which is like a group of highly technical people that provide support, and kind of on the borderline of solutions engineering. And yes, I am the first hire in the DevRel space, which usually means like fill in the blanks of the entire kind of like product community.
Which org are you under?
Lifecycle. It's independent. There's I'm not under like either of them. I'm just kind of like I just directly talk to the CEO and the product, the chief product person, pretty much like a couple times every week, which is very different from how many organizations do it. Usually it's under marketing, if not like under product or under support.
Engineering is usually the third one. It's the question is always is under marketing, product, or engineering.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So and I think PowerSync kind of I think the DevRel role kind of really works best when uh especially in like these smaller teams, and when there's like one or two people in DevRel, it works the best when it's kind of given the autonomy to uh do things the way that people see fit, because usually a lot of people who don't spend too much time with the community don't have a great vantage point of like what are the things that we should be doing. um and it's really nice that I'm getting some of that here. um and it's also that I can also, like, yeah, I'm the only time I've done DevRel professionally was at Clerk, but after Clerk I've spent a lot of time with Solid, Tanstack, um
You do a lot
and
of
I've
open
gotten to
source
see,
DevRel at this point.
yeah, so a lot of open source DevRel, like going to conferences and stuff, so that's kind of contributed to this point, because obviously like they didn't reach out to me after they saw my work on Clerk. They reached out to me after they saw my conference talk about sync engines and reactivity, so which was really nice. And I think I can now confidently say that I've the last 2 or 3 uh jobs that I've had have been through conference talks.
No, it's really cool. That's I don't know if that's like rare or not, but this definitely shows a lot of initiative. So how did you end up, what inspired you to do the sync engine talk in the first place?
Ryan,
Right,
like
right, right.
usual. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's yeah, I mean, it's everything that happens in the React versus fine-grained reactive frameworks world. um I mean, the kind of motivation of that talk was that sync engines bring in a lot of new capabilities, or capabilities that were not possible before, not just in terms of DX, but also in terms of like efficiency and performance. And Solid kind of has a very similar feel in um, over like a lot of, like, obviously React, but also other frameworks in that space that are now moving to signal based solutions. So I just wanted to kind of show that, hey, these two things are very similar to each other, and you can kind of put them together very nicely. um, yeah, so there wasn't really like anything too deep there. I think another kind of point there was that I wanted to talk to people in the local first and sync engine space, and kind of figure out what's their view of client side frameworks, um, and like kind of what does it look like from their perspective to be dealing with so many JavaScript frameworks, and which ones tend to be more difficult to work with or easier to work with. And throughout my entire time in Berlin, the only thing I kept hearing from everyone who builds sync engines is that React is the worst. It's like the most complicated to build integrations with React that actually work and that don't completely blow up your application with infinite re-renders,
Interesting.
especially with all the new new transition stuff in React.
So let's step back and before we do the kind of sync engine 101, an interesting, I think, vantage point is when you first started talking about these sync engine things, we were actually going to do
Hmm.
a stream with Peter about this, and then ended up we
Hmm.
couldn't get it together. And I kept hearing you talk about sync engines, and at first I was really confused about the term. I was like, "What is this? What is he talking about?" And then it was one of those things where after a while I was like, "Wait a second, I know what this is. I just know it by a different term." So, and you use the term. So
Probably, yeah.
some people have called this local first, or
Hmm.
and I'm sure there's a slight difference between the two. But for me, the reason why I first heard about this is this was a big conversation around 2020, 2021, because you had like Apollo with React, and they had some sort of caching mechanism that you could kind of do this with, but it was really crappy. And then you had Amplify Data Store, which I remember Swix was always really into, which is apparently like a kind of nicer version of that. And then people would say that those were kind of similar to, I think it was called Mini Mongo. There was some sort of like Mongo, this, and this relates to Meteor. You probably know a lot more about all of this than I do. So I remember hearing about all this stuff back like 2021. and it never really made a whole lot of sense to me. But then when you start talking about sync engines, I'm like, oh, this is what all those people back then were talking about. So how do all these terms relate to each other? What is the difference between local first and sync engines?
Yeah, there's a lot of kind of a weird history behind it, and it's always kind of fun to dig into, because Meteor was uh, it was the second framework that I learned and started using, but it was the first like full stack framework for me. And this was back in 2017. Like, this was after Meteor kind of had already died out of the hype.
Right, yeah.
But I think I had found some tutorials on it, and it just seemed like really nice to uh, build things with, and it just felt really simple at that time. And I didn't quite get it, because it was the first time I was actually building full stack apps, and I had never really done it any other way. Like, I used Meteor for a few years, and then I experienced the mean MERN stack of like a SQL database, an ORM, an API Express server, and then
You had a similar experience that I
consuming
had with
API.
Redwood, because I learned Redwood
Right,
first,
yeah.
and then like it was like, oh, you had this frame. Redwood was very inspired by Meteor. There's a lot of similarities there.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the key difference there is, actually no, Redwood did use Apollo something like Apollo from the beginning. So there was like a client-side caching mechanism built into it. So if you think of like stuff like Apollo and maybe even Relay, or and in some ways like just handstack query, which are basically ways to cache some data that you have fetched from the server in the client side. And that's pretty much it. You can determine like how long to keep this cache alive and things like that. You can make changes to the cache data on the client side, but in a sense, like it's just a way to cache things. Apollo and Relay kind of take it a bit further, where they don't just cache like data that's coming out of a query. They can also kind of like match and normalize them across, so that if you have two queries that are looking at the same data, you don't have the same data cached twice. You just have like the data cached once, and then the queries are looking at it. So in that sense, you have moved a bit closer to like a proper database setup on the client, instead of just like simple like key value stores. So a sync engine, you can almost think of it as like an evolution of it, where the primary way of interacting with data is completely on the client side. Like, you have a database on the client, you write queries against it, you write select queries, you write like update and insert queries, and all the changes happen on the local database. And then a sync engine's responsibility is to somehow keep it synchronized from your actual backend database, your actual backend database, whatever that ends up being. So a sync engine is the piece of technology that you would use to synchronize the data between client and server. Local first is not a technology. It's just a kind of set of ideas of what should apps look like, or what should certain apps look like. I think another way to kind of another analogy here may be like building cloud first or cloud native applications, which is a set of ideas of how we should build applications, and like infrastructure as code tools like Terraform or AWS CDK, which are like tools that you would use to build applications on the cloud. So one is a tool, one is a set of ideas on how to build apps. That's a similar distinction between a sync engine and local first apps.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, you can you can use sync engines to build apps that are not local first. In fact, a lot of the work in the last 2 years in these sync engines have been to pull them out of the local first niche and apply them in like a more general, like, hey, you can build any sort of app with a sync engine. That's kind of been the push in the last year or the last 2 years.
Interesting. I want to get into that, but yeah. So what I always heard was local first. The point, or one of the big draws, is that the app would then work when it's offline. So if you are, walking around with your phone and you lose your Wi-Fi signal, you can keep doing stuff on your app. It doesn't just break. So is that kind of the idea?
Sort of. So what you're describing is an offline first app, not a local first app, which is like there's like I can keep drawing Venn diagrams of all of these. But yeah, offline first app is where like even if you go offline, most of the app should still continue to work. Local first is like an even smaller circle inside offline first, which mainly says that the data that you have on your device is the source of truth for as far as the application is concerned. Like you own your data. It's less about like the app works offline and more about like data sovereignty.
So
like
it's
all
like
the data.
iMessages, like if you turn off iCloud. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. It's more like any sort of connection to the cloud is just for like keeping a backup or keeping my devices synchronized or collaborating with someone else. But the data lives on my device. I own it. The application doesn't own it. The developer, the company, none of them own the data. And even if the application kind of goes out of existence, the company gets bankrupt, the data still lives on. So the data has like a longer shelf life or a longer lifetime than the app itself, which is which is very different from how you might build apps like normally. So that's what local first is. Obviously, like to be local first, you also have to be offline first. So it's like a subset of offline first. And then you can use a lot of sync engines to build offline first and local first apps. Not all of them. Some sync engines kind of explicitly disable that, saying that, hey, we are only for the online use cases, not offline or local first use cases. And there are other sync engines that say that we are the most optimized for local first, and you don't want to use the sync engine for the other use cases. So there's like all the variety.
Yeah, this is getting expansive. So let's hone in. What is PowerSync designed for out of that whole spiel you just gave?
So the way that I'm trying to talk about it, and the way that we are trying to position it is that you can pretty much do everything across the spectrum with PowerSync. Which and like some of our recent features are kind of like trying to enable that more. PowerSync is essentially a way to like keep any of your backend database. Currently, we support Postgres, MySQL, MongoDB, and Microsoft SQL Server. So you can take
not
not SQLite yet. SQLite is used on the client side. So
exactly,
PowerSync so PowerSync will keep the data between a client side SQLite database and your backend Postgres, MySQL, whatever you have, and it'll keep like all the data in sync. So on the client side, you just interact with the SQLite database, and all the syncing happens automatically. And obviously, you can like come into that sync process and define your validation, auth, conflict resolution, whatever you want. So you have opportunities to customize all of that. But at the base, that's kind of the default experience.
So how does all this relate to Convex?
Convex, they try to say that Convex is a sync engine, which is true in some senses, but Convex is more like just a real-time database where you write queries against the database, and if any of the data changes, your query will rerun automatically, and the client will be updated with the latest data. Convex is like purely kind of a server-side thing. It doesn't have a full client-side database that you can query. There's no optimistic updates, which is like one of the biggest features of a sync engine, which is that you make a mutation on the client side and you see the updated UI immediately rather than waiting for a round trip. That's not true with Convex. I remember
everyone was always talking about that back in the Redwood days, was optimistic updates. That was the big thing.
Yeah, and it's been the big thing with like React and the new like Solid 2.0 as well, and a decent bit in the new like Svelte kit. So now it's something like that's being built into the web framework layer. But yeah, sync engines kind of offer that out of the box, with a lot more guarantees than what a web framework can, because it's essentially like a complete database on the client side. There's another tangent that we can go here, which is TanStackDB. Yeah, but yeah, that's almost certainly going to require a whole stream if we want to dig into like the whole landscape of sync engines and local first.
Yeah, we can expand on that once we kind of narrow down PowerSync first. So it sounds like PowerSync is trying to be a fairly generic, general sync engine that can be applied to a lot of these different use cases that you're talking about. And you also mentioned that they're trying to expand it out so it could be used for other things that was not that's not in this category of things you just talked about, local first and offline. So what are the benefits of using a sync engine for those other use cases?
The main benefit of a sync engine to me is that it eliminates a lot of the complex implementation logic that we have to put in place when it comes to like calling APIs and keeping the state on the client side in sync manually. Like if a lot of the reason why things like React Query and then Remix and Next.js simplified this simplified having how we build apps is by like getting rid of the client state and kind of reducing it as like, here's a query, when anything changes just rerun the query and your UI is up to date, right?
Yeah.
So but the problem is that, first of all, rerunning so many queries, you have to manage like the invalidation logic with things like TanStack query. If you have something like Apollo and Relay, you have a whole like a custom query layer which informs the Apollo and Relay system how to like do it more granularly, so you don't or how to like invalidate things. But if you don't have that, then you have to write a lot of that logic yourself. And then you also have to kind of like there's a lot of optimization and like just doing things over the network that are involved. I'm hoping to like kind of make a video diving a lot deeper into like all the issues that come in this area. PowerSync likes to call it the network tar pit, which is a good way to phrase it. Yeah, network tar pit. That's also the headline on the PowerSync website. Escape the network tar pit. I think I've talked about like this similar concept in some of my talks. I just called it glue code or duct tape, but I really like the network tar pit, and I want to, yeah, that one. Yeah, and I think that this sort of logic kind of exists in every web application or every mobile application, any application really that talks to a server over an API has to keep some sort of state in sync. So and yeah, this is not a problem that only local first or offline first apps have to deal with. This is a problem that I have been trying to deal with pretty much on every project since I've stopped using Meteor, because Meteor was also a sync engine, and Meteor was for like a lot of these real-time app use cases and not for like those offline local first use cases. Yeah, so that's to me that's kind of the like selling point of really using any sync engine, not just PowerSync. Most sync engines have this property that they simplify a lot of the application logic, and it kind of just boils down to just writing SQL queries from, or writing database queries from UI components. Like if you remember that Sam Selikoff slide that kind of took off at Next.js Conf, it just pretty much boils down to that, like just being able to directly access data directly on the client side and have all the data just synced seamlessly between the client and server, getting optimistic updates out of free, like for free, That's another big challenge, that having to write optimistic updates by hand tends to get very tedious, very complicated. And sync engines kind of just like eliminate all of that, because you just write the mutation once and things get synced automatically.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm thinking how this pairs well and brings us kind of full circle to your first episode. The first thing you came on to talk about was your solid real-time thing.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's not, the same obviously, but it's kind of that same idea of always wanting like a real time or kind of, instantly updating or this kind of, really interactive type UIs, like a running theme, it seems like for you.
Yeah, that's there's definitely been a lot of overlap there. And like spending my time building that, the like server signals, a solid socket library, has also kind of influenced a lot of this, because building that real-time library, a lot of this conflict resolution and offline, these things kind of come into the picture automatically. um, yeah, and that definitely kind of pushed me towards thinking more about sync engines. But I guess I initially started building solid socket because because I had already used the sync engine before that. So it's all kind of mixed up. um,
Really.
but yeah, in general, it's I've kind of spent a lot of my last few years uh trying to find ways to remove like the unnecessary abstractions that I keep running into, um and try to keep things as simple as they can. And I think I used to think it was kind of a weird like weird obsession that doesn't have a lot of like real life output. um but then the last year building with AI has completely convinced me that, oh, that was always the right thing to do, because turns out when we get rid of a bunch of like complicated logic and like make things really really simple to author, that like just accessing data directly from UI components, that turns out to be really great for AI. That uh, and it can just like continue to write components with data access anywhere, doesn't have to worry about network calls, doesn't have to worry about cache invalidation or yeah, anything like that. And this is something that I pretty much everyone in the sync engine space has seen, but it's something that we're all kind of trying to better formulate and talk about. That, hey, having sync engines makes it really easy for AI to build apps, and we just need to better explore that area.
Cool. Can you pull up the PowerSync docs and show like just some code examples so we can kind of get something a little more concrete to look at while we're talking about this?
uh, yes, absolutely. I should a lot of this stuff is like very difficult to kind of just talk about.
So far, I'm following
um,
everything you're saying. So
Share screen. Do I have to do my entire window? Come on. Okay, looks like I can just share this. Okay, you see the docs page?
yeah, bump it up just a couple.
Okay, that's fine. We don't need this. Yeah, so let's start with. I mean, the setup guide is a little bit longer, but I think this is a fine place to start. So initially, the one of the biggest advantages of PowerSync is that it works with pretty much any database that you might be using, and we're adding more here as well. And it supports like pretty much any client runtime. So if we go down here, like Dart, Flutter, JavaScript, Kotlin, Swift, .NET, Rust, everything supported. And this includes like React Native and Capacitor stuff as well. So it's one of the very few sync engines that you can use regardless of what you're building. We actually had like a category in our hackathon for um, like best submissions using the Rust SDK, and because it's like it's a like very uh, like small native SDK, you can use it for embedded apps and things like that. Um,
So you
But
were
anyways,
mentioning
that's
how it can connect with all the different front end frameworks, and I'm not seeing any of that in the docs.
give me a second, let me find. Yeah, so I was talking about kind of the support for client side integration. Like with any sync engine, you have a database on the client side, um, which is what your UI is going to directly query, or and directly like make changes to. I was talking about like what are the different languages that you can build apps in, uh, on top of the PowerSync database. Let me come and show code here. I'm gonna skip some of the setup here. Source database, sync streams. I'll get back to that later. Client SDK. Yeah, so let's go with the JavaScript web here. So basically, it kind of looks like this. You install install the SDK on the client side, and we install SQLite. So SQLite is how all the data is stored on the client side. There's a schema for the client side SQLite database. So here there's a to-dos table. Let me switch to web here. Yeah, so there's a to-dos table. You can put indexes on it. So you can define a schema like this. And then we just define your database. So you give it your schema, you tell it where the database is going to be stored on the local file system. So in the browser. And this would connect to the PowerSync service, which syncs data from your source database right down to the SQLite database. And there's some authorization that authentication, so we can give it a token, and this token will be used for authorization. And then there's the upload data. So when you make changes to the local SQLite database, all those changes kind of get queued up on this something called an upload queue. And here you tell the PowerSync SDK how to take those uploads or changes that have been made locally and push them to your own backend, where then you can write them to your source database. So this integrates with whatever backend you have. This is like ideally this is going to be, you're going to implement a backend API on your backend server, which is going to accept all these local changes and process them, run whatever validation on authorization that's required, and then make the changes to the actual database that you have on your backend. And then those changes will get synced down to the client, and the client will always have the updated copy of whatever happened. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it does. So it sounds like you're not handling as much of the back end stuff as you are like the front end stuff, because like you said, you're kind of implementing how it's going to update on your actual back end. Because when you would first describe this, I kind of imagined that would be something a sync engine would do. But I guess you want that to be more general because there's different trade-offs with how you're going to implement that.
Yeah. So some sync engines do. The main thing here is that a lot of sync engines kind of own the backend database layer as well, so they can do a lot more of the they can own that part.
Yeah.
PowerSync currently like plugs into whatever database you have and whatever backend you have, which is like a nice piece of like customizability that most people would need to have. You can have like a pretty simple version of this, which is like you just process the writes as they come in, like in the last writer wins, without a lot of like complicated like conflict resolution logic there. But we do want you to be able to like put any authorization and validation logic you want. And if the sync engine starts owning that write piece, then it also then needs to like have opinions about how you like implement auth. So for example, a super-based row level security, right? That's something that you would use row level security when you rely on super-base to make the changes to the to the database for you. You can use that here. So instead of having your own endpoint, if you have like I have a demo app that does it, like in this upload data, I just call Supabase client and make
There's
changes
a
to the
PowerSync integration for Supabase.
Yeah. PowerSync integration. Yeah, it does a lot of this, kind of like some of it out of the box. This is an area that we're looking to see if there are ways to simplify it further. But basically, yeah, this is where you would add all your authorization and validation logic. But once you have this here, the rest of the app kind of becomes pretty like as simple as this, where you have your database. You just run a watch query. So select everything from to-dos, where list ID is this list ID. And whenever the list ID changes, or whenever anything in the to-dos changes, like this query reruns, and you get the updated here, like updated to-dos here. So you can run these reactive queries against your local database. And this will always keep your UI or whatever you have in sync with whatever happens. And then you can also write the data. So you can just say on the client side, database.execute, insert this into to-dos. And it will happen on the local SQLite table immediately. And your UI will also update immediately. And then it'll go through that upload data function to your backend. If the backend decides to accept that, like it's fine, all the authorization and validation passes, then like the UI wouldn't change, obviously. But if the server decides to reject it for any reason, then the next time, basically it will be rolled back on the client then.
Interesting.
Yeah. And all of that kind of happens on the client side automatically. So one of the big pieces, one of the big places where sync engines kind of maybe differentiate from each other, or something that they kind of solve that you wouldn't get in a normal like non-sync engine world, is like consistency on the client-side database. So I mentioned earlier how if you might have two queries that look at the same data, and a lot of like a system like Apollo and Relay would they can do smart things to make sure that if two queries are looking at the same piece of data, you have that piece of data in one place, and you don't duplicate it. Well, another problem is that if you have two queries looking at the same piece of data, and somehow one of the queries rerun, and you see the updated data there, you might still be looking at the old data on the other query if for some reason it didn't update, or it didn't receive the like updated data, right? So one of the challenges is to make sure once like something has been inserted into to-dos or something has been changed, any place in the application that's querying it should see that update. Like you should never see an out of consist, or you should never be reading the same data in two places and seeing two different results.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of like the simple version. There's also like React hooks and reactive integrations for every framework.
That's what I was curious. Can you go to that?
Frameworks. Yeah, so I guess this was db.execute.
I see there's React Native, but like I haven't seen anything just for React regular.
Yeah, I mean, it would look similar, but instead of like a for await loop, this would just be a use query. I think, yeah, so it lives on React Native Expo and yeah, PowerSync SDK. No, not here. That's the source code.
Oh, here we go.
There we go. React hooks.
It's under. So there's a thing. So in the client SDKs under Node.js, there's frameworks.integration. That's where it has React hooks, Next.js, Vue, Nuxt, TanStack query, and then Expo Go.
Okay, so I'm sharing it now. It opened in a new tab, so I had to reshare from StreamYard. Okay, so reactive queries. Yeah, so it really just looks like this. Like you have a use query, you give it a SQL query, you give it the parameters, and what you get is the results. So the integration, this is kind of like one of the coolest part about sync engines in general, which is that they play really nicely with the declarative and reactive approach to like building UIs that we have developed in the last decade.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you just give it a query, you give it the parameters. When anything changes, the sync engine makes sure that you always have the updated data. And so again, this also reduces a lot of complexity in kind of building these apps, because you are just writing queries, and whenever you're making a change, I guess that's not going to be here. Let me see, use PowerSync. Yeah, so I mean, similar to dot get all here, you just say PowerSync dot execute, and you run an insert or update query. And once you've made a change to the client side database, you don't need to do anything else. Everything has already been updated, which is very different from what building apps might look like without sync engine, where you have to do a bunch of query dot invalidate, refetch this data, update this piece of cache. None of that exists here.
Yeah, no, totally. It's so funny because like this is exactly what it was like using Redwood, because you had Apollo had use query. You would have code that looks very, very similar to what we're looking at here in terms of, the declarative nature of it. You just have the query, and you didn't run SQL, you would run a GraphQL query, but it would still be kind of the same basic thing. So yeah, no. So it's always funny that every couple years will go by and I'm like, oh, here's another thing people are trying to figure out now that we had years ago. People just would have used GraphQL.
Yeah, I think every time there's like a one or two small improvements that kind of like, for example, the biggest thing here would be optimistic updates. Like I don't think you would get that in Redwood out of the box, but a lot of the other but a lot of the other things, it kind of follows that same principle, where you want to be able to co-locate your data dependency as close as possible to your component, and some form of like some query language is usually very, very helpful. So that's what GraphQL kind of brought, that it was a query language that you can compose and like interpret and do smart things with. Tanstack, Zero, and a lot of like other these sync engines today are building their own query language so that they can do fancy things. And PowerSync is just SQL. Like it's a SQLite database. No need to kind of like reinvent the database and the query layer.
Yeah,
SQLite is pretty powerful.
ORMs too.
Yeah, that's also another nice thing that comes with it, that you can just use Drizzle, which is like the best ORM that exists today, and you can just use it on the client.
Nice. So, so what kind of stuff are you doing in terms of the DevRel? Are you like writing blogs? Are you building examples? Are you interfacing with the community? Or do a little bit of everything?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of everything for now. I've written 2 blogs so far. I've made 2 videos so far. I think this last week or so has been all about the hackathon. I think one of our
unleashing the power of sync.
that was my first blog post. That title had been stuck in my head pretty much since like we started talking last year, and I've been trying to use that for a bit. Like one of the demos that I've built is a chat app, and I just called it Power Chat. Anything else I'm building, this is the name template that I'm following for all my internal projects, like Power something, Power Bot, Power Chat, Power Agent, Power To Dos, whatever. Power Notes.
With auto, everything starts with auto now. So you have offline first apps with Tanstack DB and PowerSync. That was your kind of first big tutorial blog post, it looks like.
Yeah, it didn't quite end up being a tutorial. There's not really a lot of code examples there. It mostly kind of ended up being like a conceptual piece. And it was like a follow-up to some of the discussions that my first blog post induced. Because in my first blog, the Unleashing the Power of Sync blog post, I said that hey, you can build offline first apps, and you can like integrate with your existing databases, and you can handle conflicts however you want. And that kind of like some of the other sync engines don't offer that, and they kind of started talking about like how this is an impossibility, or how this is like this leads into all sorts of problems that you might get into if you have something like this. um, so that's kind of what inspired me to write this other blog post, which was kind of me saying that, hey, it's okay, it's completely fine, you actually can build offline first apps. Here's just like a few things that you have to keep in mind when you're doing that, but as long as you're doing that, it's completely fine. It's um like it's not something to be scared of, where some people just treat it as like a very scary concept.
Right. Is there kind of a hello world example that tends to get used? Like, how Ryan has his Hacker News. Is there a similar type app that people always build with a sync engine?
Yeah, just a linear clone. That's I mean, linear was kind of like the one that inspired or started like kicked off this a majority of the sync engine space, right?
Man, I've never used linear, and people constantly say it's like linear for blank. I'm just like, well, I don't know what that means.
That basically means it's a clone of the app blank, but with like much better UX.
Word. Cool.
Yeah, linear's whole thing was that you can replace Jira with something that doesn't actually suck.
Right. Yeah, I think I remember hearing that. Yeah. So people want to get started with PowerSync. What would be the way to do that? Do you have to like? It's an open source thing, but do you create like an account? Like, is there a service? Like, how do you guys make money?
So PowerSync currently works by it uses, so there's something called the PowerSync service, which you have to deploy. The PowerSync service kind of listens to your your like actual backend database. It acts like a replication node, which means your backend database will stream any changes that it receives to the PowerSync service, thinking that it's just replicating data to a read-only node. And the PowerSync service will receive all these updates, and it'll maintain its own like internal store of like what changes have been made, what changes should be synced, what clients are connected right now, which clients receive what data, and all that. And then the client SDK connects to this PowerSync service to receive all the updates and update its own like SQLite, the local SQLite database. So PowerSync currently makes money by obviously deploying this and running this like PowerSync service on the cloud, so that you don't have to run it yourself. You can run it yourself. It is open source as well. The only thing right now is that it doesn't have the dashboard that we provide on the cloud version. Right. But other than that, you can run it through Docker. You can deploy it wherever you want. And
kind of like Supabase, how it's like there's a Supabase service, but you could run Supabase yourself. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. Or you can also run Convex yourself now, but it doesn't have like all of the same stuff that the cloud version will. So that's the the cloud hosted offering. There's also like enterprise plans for people who are self-hosting to and some support around that. So that's the cloud version. Obviously, you can host it yourself as well. And there might be like a world where we might not need to deploy a separate service. Like it might be something you can embed in your backend. This is something that like Replicache works that way, but it's also like one of the biggest complaints about Replicache is that you have to kind of build that entire backend integration piece yourself. So kind of like putting like offloading that to a separate service that handles the syncing, it like kind of really simplifies the whole integration piece.
Right. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the AI thing, and that will transition us into the solid stuff. So you mentioned briefly that local first or sync engines are really useful for AI. So can you kind of dig into that a bit more?
Yeah. So I actually just made a video on this and I put it on PowerSync's Twitter and YouTube, but I'm going to like make more videos about it and digging deeper into it. So this is a great opportunity for me to kind of refine how well I can explain
Is
this.
this building a Quest app?
Yes.
Okay.
The main idea is that imagine like take any framework or any code base that you have today and imagine like you have to add features to it. You have to like build something on top of it. How many things would you have to change, or how many things would you have to add to do that? The way I think about sync engines is that because it's just your UI components and your reactive queries to read data and like your mutation queries in your events, like your insert, like it's literally just UI components talking to a database over SQL. That's all there is to the programming model when like for the default experience. That's kind of like that. How do I explain it? I don't know. I definitely need to do some workshopping here. But it's like what I said earlier, like it eliminates a lot of the logic that you don't have to write, or that was kind of like the accidental complexity, which is like making network calls or serializing, deserializing data from the network, comparing it against local copies, cache invalidation, retries, a lot of things like that. Like they kind of just get eliminated, and the only code you have to write is your SQL queries and your UI components. If there was like in any other kind of stack, you would still have to write your UI components and your queries, but then you would also have a bunch of code in the middle for like all sorts of weird state management, cache management, or network bullshit. So a sync engine kind of just eliminates all of that and only needs you to write the stuff that was like important, or that was the essential complexity, not the accidental complexity. I don't know how much sense that makes.
I guess my question is like, what is the drawback? Why would you not use a sync engine? Because it sounds like it's just something that just, like you said, eliminates a whole bunch of problems. So it's like, what's the trade-off? Like, what's the additional complexity that you get from a sync engine?
The additional complexity is that sync engines so far have not supported all the weird things that you might want to do, because sync engines kind of come from the local first, offline first world. There are certain problems that they introduce. One of the big ones is like having to sync to like large data sets. For example, you open an app, and because a sync engine needs a bunch of data in the client side to like show you anything, but what a lot of apps will do is that they like as soon as you open the app, you won't be able to see anything for for 2 minutes, because the app is not only downloading the sync engine and the client side database bundle, but then it's also downloading a huge chunk of data set so that it can like fill the client side database. And once it's done, you get an instant experience because all the data is out there, but it takes forever to get to that point, right? That's like typically has been, that's one of the biggest weaknesses of sync based apps. In some sense, you can say that it's a feature, because the whole point is that you get instant interaction all the time, even if you have to wait for the data a little bit. But then obviously that limits a lot of use cases for what you can use sync engines for. And obviously, like the first time you go to an app, having to like stare at a loading screen for for like 10 minutes. That's not a great experience. And single page app developers have kind of been scrutinized for this point forever, like already for the last 10 years, just because of JavaScript bundles. Now we don't want to recreate that problem with actual data. But that's been like normally one of the biggest pain points. The other one that is similar is like authorization or validation, where like if you're allowing the client or the client logic to like make changes to the database wherever it wants, or make whatever changes it wants anywhere in the code, how do you
that's an
actually
issue.
validate them? Yeah, that's kind of an issue. Again, this doesn't exist in the local first space because the client or the local data is treated as authoritative, so the user is actually free to make whatever changes they want. It's not like there can be someone else to say that no, you cannot make these changes because the user actually owns that data. But that doesn't work for non-local first apps, because you actually have like business logic and authorization rules and policies that you need to enforce. So that's something that you need to somehow you need to like deal with in this model. Like it's nice to have the ability to make whatever mutations you want from anywhere. And it's kind of like the Firebase days as well, where Firebase allowed you to like just give write access to the client side and run whatever queries it wants, but you still need a way to enforce these like some sort of authorization and validation on top of it. So these are kind of like the trade-offs that come with. I wouldn't necessarily call them trade-offs. It's more like these are things you have to think about when you're using a sync engine for apps. Now the main question is like, does the sync engine you're using, how easy does it make it to actually like deal with these things? Like how easy does it make it for you to define your authorization rules, or for you to be able to define these like what we call partial sync, which is like sync only a subset of the data to the user at a time instead of the entire universe.
Yeah. Yeah, and I see you have a whole authentication section. You support authentication clients like Supabase, Firebase, Auth0
Mhm.
Clerk, Super tokens, stuff like that. Interesting.
Yeah, and the PowerSync service itself is really only responsible for like the read side, or like taking changes in your source database and syncing them to your local database. All the changes go through your backend. So the authorization that you do with the PowerSync service itself is only really concerned with what data can the user see. So kind of your read side authorization goes to PowerSync service, and then when it comes to like what changes can a user make, that's entirely left up to your backend, because your backend implements that upload data endpoint. And so that's where you put your authorization and validation logic. Different sync engines have different ways to do it. Zero, for example, has these thing called mutators, where they're just like JavaScript functions, where you give them some context, and within the function you can just like you basically have your authorization in normal TypeScript. It's going to run both on the client side and the server side. And then in that function, you look at the context, you run your validation. And it's a little different from how PowerSync does it, because in PowerSync, it's all like in your backend, and on the client side, you just write a query. So, which is a little, I think, a little deep into like the differences between these sync engines.
Yeah, no, that's great. Cool. Yeah, no, I think that's a kind of good overview. I feel like I got a lot more clarity now. Yeah, I'd be curious to kind of try it out. Let's talk a little bit about the Solid 2.0 beta release. That's live
Nice.
now, right?
It is, yes. And we have been getting a lot of discussions, a lot of feedback recently. So it's really fun times, and I'm very excited to see where this goes. I think we some of the community projects have already started moving over. One of our community members, Brendley, he has already like moved TanStack router and like a couple other TanStack stuff to Solid V2. It's fun to see.
Awesome. Yeah. So is there anything that needs to be updated from our massive stream we did 6 months ago, or is pretty much all that still holds?
I think yeah, almost everything there still holds. I mean, there's been some like when we had that stream last time, there were some kind of like missing parts or some things that weren't fully clear on how they were going to look like in Solid version 2. But obviously now that there's been a beta release, a lot of those things have now been clarified.
In terms of the features and like what you're kind of getting, the benefits, that's all the same.
Yeah, that's a lot. The core proposition has kind of like always been this the same thing. I think one of the main things that have changed is that at that time we had a primitive called create async, which is how like Solid handled any sort of like async data fetching, whatever, or like async reactivity.
Are we getting rid of create async?
Yes, the last few months, one of the bigger ones have been like
migrated all my shit to use create async. That's what the doc said to do for the last like year.
Yeah, so now create async has disappeared, and now like every reactive primitive is less just naturally async. So you can just write create async to create memo.
So is create async still a thing?
No, you just use a regular create memo. So basically the difference between create async and create memo, the only difference was that create async, you could return a promise and it would like handle that promise, whereas create memo, what the normal memoization primitive is, it didn't like do any special handling with promise. So now it's just that you can return a promise from anywhere, from a create signal function, from create memo function. You can also
I always thought though create async though was an alternative to create resource, not create memo.
Right. Yes. It was. But it's more like the way that it create resource always had like two functions. Create async kind of streamlined it, and so Solid 2 kind of always had.
How do I hit an API? How do I hit an endpoint? How do I hit an API? What do I use?
You just call fetch user or fetch API. Just call fetch inside create memo.
Interesting.
Let me find the beta release, and I think there are some code examples in here. Yeah, and I'll share my screen, and we can quickly see what this looks like. I love this. The suspense is over. There we go. So API.list users, you just do it inside create memo, and you have your users in here. And you can just pass it into your components, and you can render it however you want. So this used to be create async. Now it's just create memo.
Okay.
So
that's super relevant for all of my apps.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, now I know my migration path.
Yeah. So and I guess one of the other thing is that this used to be called suspense. Now it's called loading, because we're trying to differentiate from like React, and B, this also like works very different from the how suspense works in React and in Solid current like today. So different behavior, different name.
And then you got create optimistic store. Is that a top level utility?
Yeah. So this is what I was talking about, that now web frameworks are like taking more responsibility for optimistic state rather than like your data layer. The idea of an optimistic signal or an optimistic store is that it's something you would pair with an action. An action is kind of like a transition in React or in Solid currently, where you would when inside an action function, you would like set some optimistic data. So here, for example, in our add to do action, we're going to push this to do into our optimistic to do store. So this is going to update the UI immediately. And then we are going to like hit our backend endpoint to add it to our actual like database. And once we have, once it's like written to the server, we can just say refresh to dos, which is going to like rerun this function, basically a way to like invalidate or refetch some data. And while this entire action is ongoing, we are going to see the optimistic update that we added here. But once the action completes, this update will automatically be rolled back by Solid. So if when we refreshed this like this API.getToDos, if the new to-dos was in this like updated data from the server, that's what we're going to see on the UI, and we are not going to see this anymore. But if the server decided to reject it for some reason, this API.getToDos, when it reruns, it's going to come back without the new to-do, and this is going to get rolled back automatically, so you won't see it in the UI anymore. So
that's cool, because that used to be the thing I always
yeah.
was asking, like with the optimistic updates, like what happens if you update it and then it's wrong, because something like he just said happens. So that's one of the things I was always wondering about optimistic updates. So that's good to hear.
Yeah. So actions and optimistic updates kind of go together, where any optimistic update, it would be like shown to it would be kept alive until the action completes, and then it automatically gets rolled back. And there's also a lot of features in here for that Ryan calls entanglement. I'm hoping to find a better word to or like an easier word to describe it. But the idea of entanglement is that if you have like if you trigger one action and then you trigger another action, and both of those actions kind of affect the same part of the page or same part of the UI, they're going to get entangled together, which means they're both going to wait each other to resolve for resolving, and they're going to basically resolve together. So similarly, how transitions in React get merged, actions in Solid 2.0 can get like merged with each other, but only if they affect the same part of the UI, so that you don't see like intermediate states flicker in.
Can you go down? I saw there was a breaking changes section.
Yes, breaking changes. So index doesn't exist anymore if you were using it. The big breaking change is probably that create effect used to accept just like create effect was just an effect function. Now it's two functions, which we can see more here. Share this tab. Let me find an example for create effect. Yeah. So this is what effects look like now. You have the first function where you actually like establish the dependency, or where you read signals, and then the second function where you run your side effect. So instead of just saying console.log count parentheses, we have the first function where we read the count and return it, and in the second function we receive the count as the value, and then we log it. So small change to effect there. This has been like one of the more controversial changes, as you might have imagined. Yeah, but I think for most people that get angry with this change, my first instinct is to like kind of ask, okay, what are you actually using create effect for? Because a lot of times, if you're using create effect for something like async, or or for the ability to like override local signals from props, which are like the two most common use cases for effects. You actually don't need to use effects for those things anymore because we have those things built into reactivity. So what actually happens with 2.0 is that a lot of the usage for create effect goes away.
Yeah.
With much simpler things. And you're only remaining to use like create effect for things that it's actually designed to do, instead of stuff like async, which we have better primitives for. And this is something that's been haunting the React ecosystem forever. You might have seen like a recent article about someone banning use effect from their code base or from their team, and it went super viral.
Yeah, I mean, I had been trying to write my solid apps in a way where I didn't need to use create effect.
Nice.
Claude would keep adding it in for whatever reason. I was like, no, don't do that. Use create async.
Yeah, so that's going to be like one of the, I guess, education pieces, both for humans and AI, to learn how to use the new reactivity system efficiently. And I think another update that might be interesting. Let me find it from here. I think it was the reactivity. It's probably in the same one. Batching. Yes. So let's say that you have a Boolean signal. So we don't have the full example here, but so let's say you have a submitted signal that can be true or false, and inside this event handler, we set submitted to be true, and then let's say that right after this set submitted, we try to read the value of the signal. Well, in Solid today, you would get true because you just set the signal to true. Now, if you read it, the value will be true, right? That's the intuitive and maybe the expected behavior. In Solid 2.0, that's changing in that like it's actually still going to be false. And once you call this flush, now you're going to see the updated value. So by default, whenever you set new values into any signal, they're not going to take into effect until you call flush. So they're all going to get batched. Okay, these are the new values. They are going to be committed at some point, not right now. And calling flush is like, okay, go and commit those values now. Now everything is up to date.
Okay, so I see you have this Solid 2.0 documentation page you're looking at. These look super useful. I hadn't seen these.
Yeah, and thank Ryan's newly discovered love for agentic AI for these docs.
Yeah, I was gonna say these look pretty clean. Great. Yeah, I'm gonna use these to create a migrate skill.
Perfect.
Yeah. Let's we can talk about that just briefly to kind of set up our next episode. So I find this so funny that Ryan is in love with AI now, because I did his stream and I talked with him about AI. This is I think 6 or 7 months ago, and he didn't know jack shit. Like he clearly had like not been paying attention to the space at all, and so. And I was like, eventually Ryan's gonna get into this, like, because obviously he likes technology, So he's just kind of, late adopter, I think, as he said, and so I think it's super interesting. And now he's like all in it, and he wants to make like Solid a really good kind of AI framework. So I'm super hyped because I've been using Solid now with AI for like 2 years now, and I think it definitely has a lot of potential. So you had tweeted saying that Solid is going to be the best framework for humans and AI.
Yes.
So what does that mean?
Which is a very bold claim.
Yeah, what does that mean to be the best framework for AI?
Yeah, honestly, it's a lot of the same stuff that I mentioned when I was talking about sync engines and how sync engines are great for AI. because like the whole point is that for AI, like, okay, let me try to start it by like talking about AI code. It's not a surprise to anyone that AI tends to make a lot of mistakes, and the best way to get reliable outputs is to minimize the surface area for mistakes that AI can make. So naturally, any abstraction that reduces or eliminates like certain like complexities that increase the chances of mistakes, anything that removes them makes it easier for AI, because now the AI has like basically less opportunities to do something dangerous or to introduce bugs. um so that's kind of the idea behind both PowerSync or like sync engines and
Just similar to how
what
people
Solid
say the same
2.0.
thing for effect. That effect is really good for AI.
In a sense, yes, effect is effect it's not quite about like removing the surface area for mistakes, but more about making things like errors and dependencies more explicit in
Yeah.
the like in the TypeScript,
Yeah.
on the TypeScript level, like on the LSP or compiler level. um, so it's more about like trying to bring out all the weird inconsistencies or like weird places where things can go wrong, and make them explicit on the type level, so that you have no choice but to handle them. And if you don't handle them, your compiler is going to yell at you that, hey, here's an edge case that you did not handle. So that's really good for AI because it always gets immediate feedback of like what are the things that can go wrong, and it can decide
Yeah.
like how to address them. uh, what I'm the angle with Solid 2.0 is more that it's less about making things explicit. It's kind of like the other way around, where it's encoding more behavior into the system, so that um uh like a lot of the async behaviors become more implicit, and the code that you have to write at the end um is like kind of handles more edge cases naturally without you having to add a bunch of complexity. So I think in one of Ryan's recent streams, what he did was basically uh, like implement some basic use cases or like some basic scenarios with async. He used like the regular React style, uh, where we just use effects for everything. He kind of showed like what like all the different places where this goes wrong, and until the end, like he built a version that didn't have a lot of those edge cases, that was very robust in terms of uh, like it handled a lot of the edge cases properly, but it was very very complicated to read, and it was even more complicated to write. And
Right.
that was kind of his demonstration of, see, these are, if you go trying to handle these edge cases by hand, things are going to get really complicated, and you're going to have to keep like hold a lot of things in your head
Yeah.
to figure out like where things are going wrong or where things can go wrong. um and if you try to build something similar with Solid 2.0, the code actually stays pretty clean, pretty minimal, pretty simple. Like it's the most simple and idiomatic way that you would write your code, but it also has all these edge cases handled by default. um so what you're getting kind of like out of the box is um like something that's uh pretty robust, that doesn't need any additional logic to handle edge cases. And yeah, that's just like less room for the AI to make mistakes. All of these things that I've said, they need a lot of code samples to make
Right.
clear
That's what I was
sense
gonna
to people,
ask.
like what
It's
it means.
like ensuring that AI actually writes all this correctly, using the conventions correctly. That's where the difficulties can come in. But I'm kind of
Exactly,
optimistic
yeah.
that there's like you said, you give it good examples, and if it's working with a code base that is already using all of those, it will continue to use it. The issue is going to be more so coming into older solid apps that aren't already doing that. It'll want to keep doing things in this kind of previous way. So that's the issue I kept running into, is that I kept wanting to use like is server from like the solid web thing.
Right.
And I was like, no, don't do that. And it kept using create effect. It kept using on mount. It kept using all of these, kind of older conventions. So that's going to be the biggest thing, is how do you make sure it uses the most up-to-date things?
Yeah, definitely. And that's going to be probably the main problem with like authoring AI instructions, scales, agents, MD, whatever, to try to steer it towards like the new patterns. But overall, like if you can see what I'm sharing here, like this is basically what we have to teach it to write. Like, hey, write a create memo, fetch your data inside it, and then just render it, wrap it with the loading wherever you want. And if you want to show like some pending indicator for when things are in like happening in the background, just use is pending and do that. So, and if you're making changes, here's a way to like define an optimistic store, define an action, write to the optimistic, make your server change, refetch data, and that's it. So this is kind of what I mean by like not having to deal with edge cases, or not having to think about where things are placed. Like you can keep the loading boundary wherever you want. You can fetch data wherever you want. You don't have to like put them in a specific order. Like you don't have to create a new component just so that you can wrap with suspense. Or once you set an optimistic, you know that it's going to get automatically cleared at the end of the action at the right time. So a lot of like small things like that, when they get taken care of, the overall code, it should be pretty simple. And we just have to convince the AI that, hey, the code that you have to write doesn't have to have like 20 create signals or 20 create effects. You just write what makes the most sense.
Yeah, totally. So something that I think, if Solid really wants to be the best friend for AI, there's something very, very important it needs, which it does not have. Copy markdown. No, copy markdown buttons. If I open a PR, can I open a PR for that? Because this is constantly bugging me, because I always have to go to the GitHub repo to get the markdown files. So you gotta have a copy markdown button. So I'll open a PR for that. It's been on my mind for months and months.
Yeah, I haven't used the copy as markdown in forever. I think what I just tend to do is give my agent the URL, or it just browses the docs on its own. And most harnesses,
I usually don't use the copy markdown, because most copy markdown buttons have the open in markdown file, or you can open the markdown page and it will just give you the URL, and it gives you the raw markdown as if you're looking at the Git repo. Because what I like doing is I grab all those links for the docs I want, and I have a custom script that I have where it just takes a list of URLs, and it dumps them all to a single markdown file, and then I feed that to the LLMs, and it won't have to go search through a docs repo to find the specific docs it needs. So I like being able to do that. I just grab a bunch of URLs and then I stack them all together and I print them all out into one file.
That makes sense. Yeah, I should try that sometimes. But what I've seen is that I think pretty much every coding harness at this point, it's never going to dump the entire HTML response if you do like a web fetch. It's always going to like do some processing to like remove all the extra HTML stuff and kind of like boil it down to just the actual content. I think they probably use like some accessibility stuff that browsers use to remove all the formatting and only have the actual content there. So I think in my head that's kind of like replaced any agent specific thing that we might have to do on our servers, because just the harnesses take care of it. But it's having the option there on the docs page or on the docs server to like serve something just as markdown that's still helpful for any sort of like maybe scripts or manual kind of collection things where you don't have that stuff in place. Yeah, so that's
Mhm.
that's been something I've been thinking about for a while. Um, also stuff like should there be an MCP server or just like a docs search endpoint or a CLI or skills agents MD, like just trying to juggle everything is very interesting.
Yeah, I think right now I really think the most bang for your buck you get is from skills. I think it's the right level of abstraction. It's pretty agnostic towards tools. You
Mhm.
can get it to you can customize them for lots of different use cases. So I think having like a couple good solid JS skills would be like way more useful than having a whole MCP server.
Mhm.
I'm still not totally sold on MCP for something like that. I think MCP is most useful if you're like trying to connect like 10 different services and data sources and crap together. Then I think
Mhm.
that it still makes sense for that. But it's like, what would a solid MCP server do?
I don't know. This Svelte has an MCP server that they've been talking about for a bit. Angular has had one, but now they're also investing into skills. Yeah, so and I think the Svelte MCP server, it just list sections, get documentation, autofixer, playground link, which are I think somewhat helpful tools for sure.
Interesting. Yeah, I'll have to look into that. Okay, cool. Yeah, I want to kind of table this and have a longer discussion around
Yeah.
AI and Solid and the types of stuff that I've been building with it. But this is probably good to start wrapping it up here. We'll schedule something like another week or two. Yeah, any last things you want to mention in terms of PowerSync or Solid?
Well, the hackathon just ended, so I can't ask anyone to participate in the hackathon anymore. Um, I guess yeah, just check out PowerSync. Play around with this new solid
You
beta. I
guys do
think
events or meetups or anything like that?
no, not yet.
You guys
No
should do Twitter
meetups.
Spaces.
Twitter Spaces are dead. They are completely like ever since they have been buried behind live streams. I don't know if there's value in Twitter Spaces anymore.
Interesting.
I hope so. I mean, I think at this point it requires having someone in your Twitter space with a large following so that you can get like there's some chances that someone shows up
Don't you have like
with
10,000 followers?
10,000. Do I have 10,000? Okay, I have 14,000. Yeah,
Yep, yep,
but
14,000. Yeah.
yeah, I don't consider that to be a pretty big number, and I think a lot of like more than half of it came from being in that space with Elon Musk,
Right.
which was a complete accident.
Is there a Discord? PowerSync Discord?
There is a PowerSync Discord. Um, is it? It's not PowerSync.discord. Discord.gg/PowerSync. Or this one. Yeah, you just put in the chat.
I just realized someone said hi way back. Who is this? Mercer Case. I don't know who that is. Hello, though. Thanks for watching.
Good crowd. A lot of activity in chat.
Let me just grab these last couple links.
Yeah, I am very curious to hear about your role and more about Auto Show. So definitely want to do that the next one.
Yeah, it's multimodal now. It doesn't just create text; it creates images, music, text to speech, and video. All sorts of crap.
Lovely. There's no way I can bring like any or what kind of models do you use under the hood? And is there like anything
All
that
of them.
all of them? Nice.
I mean, name a model. I probably
Yeah.
got it.
But there isn't a way to like bring subsidized tokens from my Cloud Code or Codex into Automaker, right?
No, not right now. It's an interesting idea though. I should look into that.
Yeah, I mean, even then, it wouldn't handle like most of the like. There's only so much that Claude and GPT can do when there's also
Yeah.
like text and video or like image, video, audio generation involved.
Yeah, you get the certain services I find do have almost all of them now. Like Gemini has pretty much every modality.
Yeah.
ChatGPT has most of them as well. I'm not sure if you could use your ChatGPT credits to like generate Soras. Probably not.
I don't think so. I think it's only on the API. It's not on the Codex subscription.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, really, Autoshow is the way I'm thinking of it is for people who are not technical. So someone who is going to be like, has a $200 subscription, is trying to like share it with their other apps for like token usage. Like they're already should just be using the CLI, you know?
Yeah. Just use FFmpeg and write a bash script or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you could just cobble together your own version of it pretty easily.
Yeah, what I've been thinking about or trying to experiment with is using my Trello board as kind of like a way to manage agents. I don't know how far it'll go, but yeah, it's mostly
like
because
those
like
Ralph loops going for every ticket.
Exactly, yeah. And there's something there. I think like a lot of people have ended up at like the Kanban interface for agent orchestration independently, or not independently, but
like,
yeah.
Like who are you talking about?
Like Conductor, I think, was the one of the first big ones. Conductor.build, which is like it's on top of Claude Code. I mean, most of them are on top of Claude Code. But yeah, Conductor, Automaker is one that was built by WebDev Cody. There's some people who have added like Kanbans to OpenCode, to T3 code. Yeah, but so now I'm thinking that instead of building a Kanban interface, let's just use the one we already have, a very nice one at that, and just plug agents into that.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah, I haven't vaguely heard of Conductor. I didn't really know what it was. I haven't heard of Automaker at all. I'll have to check these out. These don't look like they're really my style, but they're interesting.
Yeah, that's fair. But yeah, the reason I bring it up is because I'm trying to like track all the DevRel stuff in Trello as well. So maybe I can have Trello cards for like, here's an idea, generate a bunch of tweet suggestions for this, or generate a video script for this. Or maybe once I've recorded it, I put it in Trello and it automatically creates, I don't know, create show notes, cuts them into little bits and pieces. Yeah, and maybe if Automaker has an API, I can plug that with my Trello, and yeah, that's all stuff for next stream. I guess that's like a little bit of a preview of what I'll have in my head when looking at Automakers. Like, can I bring this into my Trello board?
Awesome, man. Well, cool. Thanks so much, dude. Always appreciate doing these. Sounds like PowerSync is pretty interesting, and yeah, I'm glad you're working on tech that like you find interesting and you're excited about, and that you're back in the DevRel world, which is always fun.
No, yeah, definitely. There's never been kind of a better time to be working on sync engines.
All right. Well, with that, we'll close it out. Thank you, everyone who was watching. We'll catch you again in a couple weeks. And that wraps it up for today. So catch you guys next time.